In the tense silence of Houston's mission control, as Apollo 11 hurtled toward the moon, carrying humanity's greatest dreams, every critical calculation protecting Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin's lives had passed through the brilliant mind of a black woman whose name history nearly forgot. Her mathematical genius had quietly revolutionized space exploration. Yet most Americans watching that historic moment had never heard of Katherine Johnson, the black woman who changed how NASA made calculations and changed history. The steady hum of the air conditioning system in Houston's Mission Control Center had been running for 72 hours straight that July morning in 1969. Flight Director Gene Kranz adjusted his white vest and checked the mission clock for what felt like the 1,000th time. Apollo 11 was less than 18 hours from the most critical moment in human history, the lunar landing attempt. But as he studied the trajectory calculations scrolling across the green phosphor screens, Kranz knew that every number, every decimal point, every computational verification that would guide Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin to the moon's surface had been influenced by the mathematical genius of a woman whose name most Americans had never heard. Katherine Johnson sat in her modest home in Hampton, Virginia, watching the same coverage on her black-and-white Zenith television that captivated 650 million viewers worldwide. At 51 years old, she had officially retired from NASA's Langley Research Center just months earlier, but her legacy was written in the precise orbital mechanics that had launched every American astronaut into space. The algorithms she had perfected, the computational methods she had pioneered, and the mathematical standards she had established were the invisible foundation supporting humanity's greatest adventure. The story of how a brilliant black woman from rural West Virginia had quietly revolutionized space exploration began 30 years earlier, in an era when segregation was law and women mathematicians were called computers, human calculators performing the complex equations that would one day guide rockets to the stars. Catherine Coleman, as she was known before marriage, had graduated from West Virginia State College at age 18 with the highest honors in mathematics and French. In 1953, when President Eisenhower was contemplating the interstate highway system, and Lucy and Ricky Ricardo were America's favorite television couple, Catherine answered a classified advertisement for mathematical positions at the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, NACA, the predecessor to NASA. The Langley Memorial Aeronautical Laboratory in Hampton occupied 764 acres of Virginia tidewater, its red brick buildings housing the nation's most advanced wind tunnels and research facilities. But in 1953, it was also a place divided by Jim Crow laws and institutional prejudice. Black employees worked in the segregated West Area computing section, isolated in a separate building with separate bathrooms, separate dining facilities, and separate career limitations. The white mathematicians and engineers rarely acknowledged their existence, despite depending entirely on their calculations for critical research data. Catherine entered this world with characteristic determination and an almost supernatural gift for numbers. Her supervisor, Dorothy Vaughan, recognized immediately that this young woman possessed mathematical abilities that transcended racial and gender barriers. While other human computers performed routine calculations using mechanical desktop machines, the IBM 602A calculating punches and Monroe calculators that filled the computing rooms with their rhythmic clicking, Catherine demonstrated an intuitive understanding of complex mathematical relationships that bordered on genius. The mathematical landscape of 1950s aerospace research was transitioning from slide rules and logarithmic tables to the first generation of electronic computers. The IBM 704 mainframe computer, installed at Langley in 1957, occupied an entire air-conditioned room and could perform 40,000 operations per second, revolutionary speed for its time. Yet the machine required human programmers to translate complex mathematical problems into binary code, and even more importantly, it required human verification of its results. No astronaut would trust their life to a computer calculation without human confirmation. Katherine's breakthrough came in 1957 when the Soviet Union launched Sputnik, shocking America and igniting the space race. The 183-pound satellite orbiting Earth every 96 minutes had caught American scientists completely off guard. President Eisenhower established NASA in 1958, absorbing NACA and dramatically expanding the scope of American space exploration. Suddenly, the segregated computing pools at Langley found themselves at the center of a national emergency. America needed to catch up with Soviet space achievements, and they needed the best mathematical minds available. The transition from NACA to NASA brought subtle but significant changes to Langley's racial dynamics. Dr. Robert Gilruth, who would later direct the Apollo program from Houston, began requesting specific mathematicians by name for critical projects. Katherine's reputation for precision and innovative problem-solving had reached the engineers working on Project Mercury, America's first manned spaceflight program. In 1958, she was temporarily assigned to the Flight Research Division, leaving the West Area Computing Section forever. The azimuth angle calculation became Katherine's signature contribution to early spaceflight. While electronic computers could process vast amounts of data, they struggled with the three-dimensional geometric relationships required for orbital mechanics. Katherine developed analytical methods for calculating the azimuth angle, the precise launch direction needed to place a spacecraft into its intended orbit. Her handwritten equations, worked out with nothing more than pencil, paper, and a Frieden calculating machine, became the standard for all NASA launch operations. Project Mercury's success depended entirely on precise mathematical calculations. The Mercury Redstone rocket that would launch America's first astronaut, Alan Shepard, generated 78,000 pounds of thrust and required split-second timing for every phase of flight. The trajectory calculations needed to account for Earth's rotation, atmospheric conditions, gravitational variations, and dozens of other variables that could mean the difference between a successful mission and catastrophic failure. Katherine's mathematical approach combined traditional analytical geometry with innovative computational techniques. While other mathematicians relied heavily on approximation methods and simplified models, she insisted on exact solutions derived from first principles. Her calculations filled notebooks with precise equations describing parabolic trajectories, orbital velocities, and re-entry angles. Each number was verified multiple times using different mathematical approaches, creating a level of confidence that impressed even the most skeptical engineers. The social dynamics of Katherine's integration into NASA's Flight Research Division reflected the broader civil rights struggles of the late 1950s. While the Supreme Court had declared school segregation unconstitutional in 1954, Virginia had responded with massive resistance, closing public schools rather than integrating them. The Little Rock Nine were escorting federal troops to Central High School, and Rosa Parks' Montgomery bus boycott had galvanized the civil rights movement. Against this backdrop of racial tension, Katherine quietly revolutionized aerospace mathematics. Her colleagues initially viewed her with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. The Flight Research Division had never included a black woman, and many engineers questioned whether someone from the computing pools could contribute to advanced research. Katherine answered their doubts with mathematical precision and professional dignity that gradually earned their respect. She attended previously all-white briefings, asked probing technical questions, and contributed insights that often solved problems that had puzzled entire engineering teams. The Mercury Atlas missions required even more sophisticated calculations than the earlier suborbital flights. Katherine worked directly with NASA engineers to develop computational methods for orbital insertion, rendezvous procedures, and precision landing techniques. Her calculations guided John Glenn's historic February 1962 orbital flight, when Friendship 7 circled Earth 3 times in 4 hours and 55 minutes. Glenn himself had specifically requested that Katherine verify the IBM 7090 computer calculations before his launch, saying he trusted her numbers more than the electronic systems. The mathematical challenges grew exponentially with the Gemini program, designed to test the techniques required for lunar missions. Spacecraft rendezvous required calculating the orbital mechanics of 2 vehicles moving at 17,500 miles per hour in 3-dimensional space. Katherine developed the mathematical framework for these operations, creating equations that allowed one spacecraft to locate approach, and dock with another while both orbited Earth. Her work on orbital rendezvous became fundamental to all future space operations, from the Apollo lunar missions to the International Space Station construction decades later. President Kennedy's May 1961 commitment to landing Americans on the moon before the decade's end transformed NASA into a focused organization with unlimited resources and unprecedented urgency. The Apollo program required mathematical precision beyond anything previously attempted in human history. The Saturn V rocket stood 363 feet tall and weighed 6.2 million pounds fully fueled, the most powerful machine ever successfully operated. Every aspect of its flight, from launch through lunar landing and Earth return, depended on mathematical calculations that had to be absolutely perfect. Katherine's role in Apollo mission planning combined her expertise in orbital mechanics with new challenges in lunar navigation. The moon's gravitational field, while only 1/6 of Earth's strength, created complex mathematical problems for spacecraft approaching the lunar surface. The lunar module's descent and ascent required precise knowledge of the moon's rotation, gravitational variations, and surface topology. Katherine worked with NASA's newly installed IBM system, 360 computers, to develop computational methods that could handle these unprecedented calculations. The Apollo 8 mission in December 1968 represented the culmination of Katherine's mathematical contributions to lunar exploration. Frank Borman, James Lovell, and William Anders became the first humans to leave Earth's gravitational influence, traveling 240,000 miles to orbit the moon 10 times before returning safely. Their flight path, calculated using methods Katherine had pioneered, took them around the moon's far side, a region no human had ever seen directly. The trajectory calculations required mathematical precision to several decimal places, with no margin for error in the cold vacuum of space. Mission Control in Houston monitored every aspect of Apollo 8's flight, using computational systems that reflected Katherine's mathematical innovations. The Mission Operations Control Room, with its rows of console positions and giant display screens, represented the practical application of her theoretical work. Flight controllers tracked the spacecraft's position using radar data processed through mathematical models she had helped develop. The success of Apollo 8 proved that American mathematical capabilities had surpassed Soviet achievements and that lunar landing was actually possible. The social transformation at NASA paralleled the broader civil rights advances of the 1960s. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 had outlawed workplace discrimination, and NASA actively recruited talented mathematicians and engineers, regardless of race or gender. Katherine's visibility and success had opened doors for other black scientists and mathematicians, creating a more diverse and capable workforce. By 1969, NASA employed hundreds of black engineers, mathematicians, and technicians whose contributions were essential to the space program's success. Katherine's mathematical philosophy emphasized verification and redundancy, never trusting a single calculation or computational method. She routinely solved the same problem using multiple approaches, comparing results to identify potential errors or approximations that might compromise accuracy. This methodical approach became standard practice throughout NASA, creating a culture of mathematical rigor that prevented the computational errors that could have caused mission failures. The Apollo 11 mission represented the practical application of mathematical principles Katherine had developed over 16 years at NASA. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin's lunar landing depended on trajectory calculations, orbital mechanics, and navigation systems that incorporated her innovative approaches to complex three-dimensional problems. The lunar module, Eagle's descent to the Sea of Tranquility, required mathematical precision that had seemed impossible when Katherine first arrived at Langley in 1953. Mission Control's computers processed thousands of calculations every second during Apollo 11's flight. But the fundamental mathematical relationships governing spacecraft motion remained the equations Katherine had derived using pencil and paper. The IBM System 360 computers that monitored the mission were simply electronic tools for implementing mathematical principles she had established through years of careful analysis and verification. Katherine's influence extended beyond individual calculations to the entire philosophical approach NASA adopted toward computational verification. Her insistence on human oversight of computer calculations became standard policy for all critical mission operations. No computer result was accepted without independent verification using alternative mathematical methods. This redundant approach prevented computational errors that could have caused mission failures and established NASA's reputation for mathematical reliability. The success of Apollo 11 validated mathematical methods that Katherine had pioneered 20 years earlier. As Neil Armstrong stepped onto the lunar surface on July 20, 1969, his words, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," represented the culmination of countless mathematical calculations that had begun with Katherine's early work on orbital mechanics. The precise navigation that brought Eagle to a safe landing site in the Sea of Tranquility reflected mathematical principles she had established through years of methodical calculation and verification. Houston's mission control erupted in celebration as Armstrong confirmed the successful landing, but the mathematical foundation for that achievement had been laid in the segregated computing rooms of Langley Research Center 16 years earlier. Katherine's transition from human computer to research mathematician had paralleled America's transformation from a segregated society to one that recognized talent regardless of race or gender. Her mathematical contributions had made lunar landing possible, while her personal courage had opened doors for countless others. The Apollo program's success validated Katherine's approach to mathematical problem-solving and established computational methods that would guide space exploration for decades to come. Her equations describing orbital mechanics, trajectory calculations, and navigation systems became the foundation for all future space missions. The mathematical principles she developed would eventually guide space shuttle operations, International Space Station construction, and robotic missions to Mars and beyond. Katherine Johnson's legacy transcended individual mathematical achievements to encompass a fundamental transformation in how America approached complex technical problems. Her insistence on verification, precision, and theoretical understanding had created a mathematical culture at NASA that prioritized accuracy over speed and human insight over blind computational trust. The success of the Apollo program demonstrated that this approach could achieve seemingly impossible objectives through careful mathematical analysis and methodical verification. As Apollo 11's crew splashed down safely in the Pacific Ocean on July 24, 1969, completing humanity's first lunar landing mission, the mathematical foundation for their achievement remained largely invisible to the celebrating crowds. But within NASA's technical community, Katherine Johnson's contributions were recognized as fundamental to the space program's success. Her mathematical innovations had transformed theoretical calculations into practical tools for space exploration, establishing the computational foundation that would support human spaceflight for generations to come. The black woman who changed how NASA made calculations had indeed changed history, not through dramatic gestures or public recognition, but through mathematical precision that made the impossible possible. Her legacy lived in every successful mission, every safe return, and every mathematical verification that protected human lives in the unforgiving environment of space. Katherine Johnson had proven that mathematical genius transcends all barriers, and that precision and perseverance can literally reach for the stars.